Okay, looks like that is up and running. So that means we can be up and running. Good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in the 10th of our 5782 Pathway to Judaism class. We are going to be looking at something a little bit less tangible than the last two sessions. Last two sessions, we've talked about kashrut, but as much as we want to focus on what goes into our mouth, and that is very important, we also have to focus on what comes out of our mouth, meaning the words, the language that we speak. Now, this is not just a pitch for learning more Hebrew, although obviously Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language, is wonderful to learn, and I highly recommend it. However, in any language, there are certain rules for how we conduct our speech. And this is not a public speaking class, but this is even more important. So we're going to see what we need to do to guard and guide our tongue. So we're going to focus to begin with different types of damaging speech. Now, it may seem a little petty to divide up different types of speech into different categories, but there are different definitions, different rules, and I hope you'll find different guidelines that will inspire you and shape how you speak by looking at them in more detail than just saying bad talk. So we're going to look at rechilut, usually translated as gossip, at Lashon Hara, which there isn't a great English translation for, but I'm calling it harmful rumors, Sheker, which is lies, Motzei Shem Ra, which can be translated as slander. Literally, it means the causing of a bad name, and Onat Devarim, which we're going to translate as a more subtle form of harmful speech. It can also be translated more literally as oppressing with words. But these are all separate categories and each have their own guidelines. So let's get into those. So rechilut is defined as the sharing of news and information about others when it is not needed and it is not meant to be harmful or insulting. Right? The classic English word for this is gossip. Now, you might have heard as gossip always being bad, and gossiping is wrong, but that doesn't mean that the subject of gossip is bad. And this is a very important distinction. Many people feel that they can talk about others as long as they don't mean to be harmful, or as long as what they're saying is truthful, or as long as what they're saying is not insulting. That is still gossip, even if it is not meant to be harmful, it is not insulting, and you think that it's perfectly fine, you're still gossiping, and thus you are still violating Leviticus 19, verse 16. You shall not go up and down as a gossiper among your people. So an example of what appears to be perfectly harmless chat about another person might be, did you hear the Cohens got another dog? While there is nothing harmful in that sentence, and we can assume that in the situation, the speaker did not mean for it to be harmful as well, it's not your business to talk about the Cohens' dog to someone other than the Cohens'. If you want to talk to the family about their dog, great, be neighborly, chat, it is a wonderful part of life. But talking to the other neighbors about the dog is, in a sense, inciting an opportunity for more conversation, which may not end up as well. So we do not begin with gossip as all. Now we're going to go into more detail about why all of these are prohibited. So for right now, I just want to kind of focus on the definitions. I'll give a few examples, though, as we go to make it a little clearer. Lashon Hara, on the other hand, are harmful rumors, right? This is saying something that is negative, but like rechilut, like gossip, is also true about a person, while not seriously trying to correct or improve the situation. And I'm going to underscore that idea about not trying to correct or improve the situation. Right now, there is a very big issue in Medinat Yisrael, in the state of Israel, where a very famous rabbi who wrote many books and was a counselor for many people just committed suicide after having been quite substantially accused of years, decades of abuse against dozens, if not more, of clients and other people, ranging from young to old. And there are some that say that those that brought out the allegations are guilty of Lashon Hara because it was negative but true. However, that is not Lashon Hara in a case of abuse. If somebody is involved in abuse, or if a person has been abused, even worse, they absolutely should come forward to the appropriate authorities, meaning law enforcement or other civil authorities, to try and bring the person who caused the abuse to justice and to punish them so they can never commit that abuse against anyone else. Doing so, meaning bringing that information forward about the crimes that someone committed, is not Lashon Hara. It might be negative, it might be true, but it is necessary to correct or improve the situation. So I just wanted to make sure that in light of the recent discussion in Israel about this rabbi, that it is 100% clear to everyone in this class, bringing out any information about a person that is committing crimes or is abusing others is not a violation of Lashon Hara. That is actually fulfilling the mitzvah of not standing by while someone is being hurt. So, that said, there is no agreed classic English translation for this Lashon Hara. Maybe the word denigration is closest, but it doesn't really fit neatly into English because English is usually more obsessed with true and false, and Lashon Hara is something that is true but negative and thus still prohibited. So this is a more severe form of the prohibition from Leviticus 19. If you're not allowed to go around talking about someone else when it is true and harmless, you are certainly not allowed to go around talking about someone else when it is true and harmful. So they both are found under that same heading. Sheker is what most of us are more familiar with as the classic definition of bad speech. That is lying. Not maybe, not kind of, an actual lie, meaning that it was knowingly intended to spread misinformation about a topic or person. If you are not reasonably confident that your information is true, and by reasonably confident, I don't mean I saw it on the internet somewhere, but you actually are sure that it is true. If you are not reasonably confident, maybe you only did see it in someone's Facebook post or someone tweeted it. If you think it is information that is important and worth knowing, you should check it, definitely before you share it with anyone else. And the burden of proof is on the speaker. Right? That doesn't mean that you get to say, oh, this might be true, I thought you might be interested. If you're not sure if it's true, you don't make the person who hears you have to do the grunt work of figuring out whether it's true or not. You, the person speaking or sharing, have to do your work before you do that speaking or sharing. It's fine to wait if you're not sure until you have checked it. And again, it doesn't matter whether you're sharing it thinking you're going to do harm or not. If it is not true, it should not be passing your lips, or in the modern world, it should not be touching your keyboard. And if you're not sure, check it first. And we know this, of course, from Exodus 23:7, keep far away from anything false. And that means even something as simple as saying the USA is the biggest country in the world is inappropriate because it's not, right? I love the United States, but it is a lie to say that it's the biggest country. It is not number one in population. It is not number one in land size. So that would be a lie were I to say it, intending it to be taken seriously rather than just as an educational example. All right, so we've had three categories so far. We've had things that were true and harmless. They are prohibited if they're about someone else. We've had things that were true and harmful. They are prohibited. And we've had things that are not true, maybe harmless, maybe harmful, but also not prohibited because it's not true. As you can see, despite the fact that Jewish people are known for talking a lot, we have to work hard to make sure that we are only talking about the right things. Motzi Shem Ra is a special category of a type of lying. And Motzi Shem Ra, the bringing out of a bad name, is when you are saying things that will damage a person's reputation or livelihood. Now, unlike Lashon Hara or Rechilut, this is definitely not true, right? You are definitely lying about this in the case. Now, in English, we call this slander. Now, I will remind you again that in a case where the person's reputation or livelihood needs to be damaged because they have been causing damage, like in the case of an abuser, you are not violating this commandment by bringing that information to light. In fact, you are fulfilling the commandment of lo ta'amod dam ra'alecha. You not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. You are standing up for others when you do that. But in a case where that is not what's happening, you just feel like slandering someone, maybe in competition for business, maybe to stir up trouble, absolutely prohibited. For example, I heard Mr. Levy hits his wife. If you know that's not true, then you are absolutely violating the Torah to say such a thing about Mr. Levy. If you know it is true, then you are absolutely doing the right thing if you are talking to the police or protective services to try and help Mr. Levy's wife. So it really does also matter the audience. Even if you know it to be true, if you're just sharing it with your neighborhood gossip circle, you're not actually helping the situation. And in fact, you may be causing more harm. So make sure that if you have something that will be damaging but needs to be shared, that you are sharing it with the proper authorities. And likewise, I heard Company Q is going bankrupt. If it's not true, then you are definitely causing harm to that company and the people who work there, and it should not be said. And if you do say it, you are violating the Torah. All right, one more category, and then I'll take a pause for questions. So onat devarim is perhaps the hardest to get a handle on. It means literally to wrong or oppress somebody with words. And this refers to many other types of offenses which harm another, and importantly, where only the speaker knows the truth, right? Ultimately, we can check whether or not Company Q is going bankrupt. Ultimately, we can check whether or not the Cohen's got a new dog or something like that. But in the cases of onat devarim, and we'll look at some examples, it can usually be a situation where there's no way 100% for another person to check the validity or the intentions of what was being said. Now, the idea is based from Vayikra, Leviticus 25, 14 through 18, which talks about when you sell property to your neighbor or buy any from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. And that wronging one another is the root of this. But our sages explain to us that wronging someone doesn't happen only with finances. For example, the classic examples given in the Talmud. If a convert comes to learn Torah, if a convert comes and learns to learn Torah, do not say to him, "Shall a mouth that ate forbidden foods, abominable and creeping things, now come and study Torah, which was uttered by the mouth of God." All right, what's wrong with that sentence? Well, what's wrong is maybe you mean that as an insult, right? You grew up eating all sorts of things that are forbidden by Torah, and now you're going to learn Torah? But the danger is that you could say that and mean it as an insult, but do it in a way that the person doesn't know that you're insulting them. Isn't this amazing? Look at this guy. Just last year, he was out eating cockroaches, and now here he is learning Torah. Isn't he amazing, ladies and gentlemen? How does the person that's being spoken of react to that? Do they treat it as the insult that it might be? Do they treat it as the compliment that's kind of being said? They're not sure because there's no way to know what the first person meant when they said it. And as such, you are essentially robbing a person, defrauding them of the honesty of the conversation. And you're putting them in a position where they don't even have the right to get angry, because you can just say, "Oh no, I just meant it as a joke. No, I meant it as a compliment." And now what are they supposed to do with this? Similarly, if one suffers afflictions or lost a child, God forbid, do not say, as Job's companions told him, "Is not your fear of God your confidence, and your hope the integrity of your ways? Remember now, who that was innocent ever perished." What's wrong with that, right? Job's friends came and tried to give him comfort. Yeah, but their comfort was, again, a backhanded way of saying, if you were innocent, you probably wouldn't have had all these problems. Maybe the reason you're suffering is because God is punishing you because you must have done something bad. And that is the opposite of comfort. That is the opposite of consolation. That is the opposite of empathy. But it is wrapped up in a sentence that makes it look like I'm trying to be helpful. Just like Job's friends looked like they were trying to be helpful, when in reality, of course, they weren't, which is why God kicks them out and prefers Job greatly to them. So again, somebody might say something in this backhanded, convoluted sort of way that will actually be insulting, but putting the person in a position where they cannot properly read the mood of the sentence or even defend themselves. Two other examples that we need to get on the table. If donkey drivers sought grain from a person, right, they're looking for a gas station for their donkey, he should not say, go to so-and-so who sells grain, knowing that the person has never sold any, right? Being a troll, and to use the modern internet term, is not allowed. If someone says, hey, do you know where there's a gas station? And you say, oh, yeah, just down that road, 2 miles, just keep going. And there's no gas station and you're just saying it as like a prank and that person's going to drive off and get stuck. You are breaking Torah. You're not just being like, a little mean and ha, 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 ha. No, you're actually violating a commandment. And what's worse is the person who gets stuck won't even know if you did it on purpose or if you didn't, because how will they know your intention? Maybe you just made a mistake. Maybe the gas station closed and you didn't know. So they won't even have a proper response emotionally to what happened to them. Likewise, said Rabbi Yehuda, one may also not pretend to be interested in a purchase when he has no money, since this is known only to the heart, and of everything known only to the heart it is written, and you shall fear your God. If you've ever thought, I'll just pop into the store and I'll check out what the things look like, but I'm just shopping. I am definitely not buying. No way, 100% categorically impossible. I am dead broke. But, the shop is open. It's free. Why not? That is not appropriate because the shopkeeper doesn't know what's in your heart. The shopkeeper sees somebody coming in and thinks they have a potential sale, and they will want to do their best to try and sell something to you. And if you don't buy, they will maybe lower their prices or change their sales techniques. They will adapt, but really they're adapting to somebody that was pretending to be interested, not somebody that was actually interested. And that is not fair to anyone trying to run a business. So this is a very, very high standard of integrity in our speech and in our behavior, but it is one that is very important, as we'll look at in more detail in just a second. So far we have had rechilut, gossip, which is where you are saying true things that you don't mean to be bad, but you have no business sharing. And we had Lashon Hara, where you are saying true things that you hope are bad, and you again have no business sharing. And we had Sheker, where you are saying lies, which maybe are going to be harmful or maybe not, but because it's a lie, you shouldn't be sharing it. And we look at Motzi Shem Ra, where you are slandering a person, you are deliberately trying to insult their name, their reputation, their business, their livelihood. And again, you have no business doing that. And Onat Devarim, where you are deliberately misleading a person with your speech in a way that is not going to be an outright lie and is not going to be directly harmful, but is still putting them in this horrible position that they are going to be unable to properly respond because they can't tell what you actually mean by this conversation. All right, any question on these primary categories? Okay. Now,
Hey,
oh yeah, go ahead, Nafi.
I was just going to say, with the how do you pronounce that? It's the last the last name is Hara. But what's the
the Motzi Shem Ra, that one, or Lashon Hara?
Right, yeah,
Lashon Hara. Right.
I was thinking about that one. Is that like some type of like big discussion in like Mishnah or a different text as far as how different rabbis interpret that, or is that just what that is?
That is what that is. There is a lot of discussion about the exceptions to the rule, and we're actually going to get to that at the end tonight. Of when would something that was normally Lashon Hara be actually allowed? Because there are circumstances where it is okay to say something that is negative and true about someone else. I've already given the big example of if there is secret abuse or other problems. You see somebody stealing from the company and you need to tell the boss. Those kinds of things are definitely allowed. But we're going to go into some more examples of exceptions later on.
Okay, no problem.
But yeah, there have been whole books written on how we govern our speech. This is just the bare minimum skeleton guideline. All right. And in addition to all of these primary categories, we also can talk about what is known as avak Lashon Hara, or literally the dust of Lashon Hara. So this is something that is prohibited, even though it doesn't actually cross the line officially. For example, if one says, "Don't ask me about him, I don't want to say what happened," right? You are giving the hint that there's something bad, but you're not actually saying the bad thing, either truthful or lying, but you're still leaving behind the muddy residue of some kind of stain against that other person. So while you haven't gone entirely over the line, you got so close that you are definitely in violation. Likewise, anyone who praises his friend in front of those that hate him has spoken avak Lashon Hara, since this causes them to speak badly of him. All right, if you are, again, we'll try the office example, you're hanging out at the office and you know that Frank does not get along with Tom, and you tell Frank, well, you know, I think Tom did a great job on that last assignment. You know, Frank is just going to start going off on how much he hates Tom, and he's going to start insulting Tom. Now, technically, you didn't say anything bad about Tom. Technically, you weren't doing anything in violation of the mitzvah, but you really got the ball rolling, knowing that this was going to trigger the response from the other guy. So again, that is something that we should watch when we open our mouth. Now, why is Judaism so careful about all of this? Like I said, there are books and books and books written about all of this, and many, many sermons given about all of this. But why? Well, just a few of the examples from the Tanakh itself, beginning from the book of Proverbs, chapter 18. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that indulge it shall eat the fruit thereof. Meaning that if you are the kind of person who goes around saying bad things about other people or doing gossiping or doing slander, it will eventually come back to you in a harmful, negative way. Now, additionally, of course, you're hurting other people, but even if you don't care about them, because, you know, you're a selfish jerk, you should still care about yourself, and you will eventually be harmed by this process. Likewise, Psalms says in chapter 34, who is the man who desires life, who loves days of seeing good? Right? Who is that person? Guard your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. That will put you on the right path. If you want to really have a good life, then you need to guard how you speak, and you need to be far from lies. Additionally, if we look at the commentary on Leviticus 19, which we talked about earlier, this time coming from the great commentator Rashi, you shall not go about as a gossiper. He emphasizes those words. I say that since all those who start quarrels and speak Lashon Hara go into homes to seek what evil they can see or what evil things to tell in the marketplace, they are the same as those who go about spying. So he's pointing out that to travel around as a gossiper is basically the equivalent of like being a spy against the country. Now, you may think that spying against your neighbors is not such a big deal as spying against your country, but your country is made up of your neighbors, and you may not be spilling national secrets to our enemies, but you are still creating enemies within your community. And that is a big deal, and that is just as bad as being a spy. Additionally, going back to our book of Proverbs, these 6 are hated by the Lord, and the 7th is the abomination of his soul, a idiom for this is really, really bad. Haughty eyes, being arrogant, a false tongue, lying, hands spilling innocent blood, a murderer, a heart plotting vain thoughts, meaning you're dwelling on bad things, feet hastening to run evil by somebody that doesn't even hesitate to do wrong, a false witness spouting lies in a court, and the inciter of strife among siblings, the kind of person who gossips and slanders in order to create fights between siblings, brothers, sisters, or just fellows together. Now, you'll notice that almost all of these, apart from the shedding of blood and the arrogance, are things that we basically usually commit with our mouth. And it may seem shocking to put murder and gossiping on a similar line, but indeed that is what the Bible, the Tanakh, does, and indeed what our tradition does. It points out, this time from Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, think about what happened to Miriam, right? Miriam, Moses' sister, who spoke about her younger brother. She was talking to Aaron, the other brother, about about Moses' wife, for whom she had risked her life, right? We know that she loved her brother. She risked her life to save him from the Nile, right? Even Miriam, she didn't even speak negatively about him, other than compare him to other prophets. According to the Midrash, by talking about his wife, what she was actually doing was saying, I don't know why he's not sleeping with his wife. Prophets are allowed to have intimate relations. And in the process, she was committing an act of rechilut or Lashon Hara. Moses himself didn't even mind. He didn't object to this, right? Still, she was punished with sara'at, the skin affliction that came to her. So even if Miriam, who was a beautiful person, who loved her brother, who wasn't even trying to necessarily be negative about him, even Miriam got punished with sara'at, what about the wicked and the foolish people who speak all times of haughty and pompous words? Anyone who wishes to improve should stay away from such people, right? If you think that you're a good enough person that your gossip is harmless, do not even imagine that, because Miriam, who was miles better than all of us, she also was punished for the gossip that she spread. And all the more so for people that aren't even close to Miriam's stature should beware. And for the rest of us, we should stay away from those people that engage in this kind of gossip, right? Indeed, the rabbis tell us further, again, taken from Rambam. The rabbi said, 3 sins are punished in this world, and the sinner loses his place in the world to come: idolatry, incest, and bloodshed. And Lashon Hara, which would be number 4, is equivalent to all of them. Now, that's pretty heavy words, right? But why? Furthermore, the rabbi said that Lashon Hara kills 3 people: the speaker, the receiver, and the one spoken about. And the receiver more than the speaker. Now, that lesson at the end there is trying to say that, yes, the person who shares the gossip is primarily responsible, but the person who listens to the gossip, who gives room for it in the conversation, who doesn't say, up, I don't want to hear it, right? Who doesn't shut down that line of conversation, that person is also being harmed, and in some ways is being harmed worse than the speaker, right? Because that person is now being contaminated and willingly allowing themselves to be contaminated by the words that are being shared with them. So that person needs to realize that they are being harmed by it. It's not harmless to just let the person talk. You are still being hurt by sticking around for that type of conversation. And of course, in the actual person that's the target is also being hurt as well. All right. And additionally, what's so bad about all of this? Well, what is the tikkun, right? Tikkun is the general word we use for the remedy. How do we fix when we make certain mistakes, right? If I steal money from you, I fix it by giving the money back and paying the penalty. If I kill your dog, I I fix it by giving you a payment or a new dog. What do I do to fix Lashon Hara? There is no Tikkun, right? There is no remedy. This is what makes it so insidious. If I punch you, right, we can take you to the doctor and get you fixed up. If I slander you, how do I stop that slander once it is out in the world? How do I go and find everybody who heard it and convince them that what I said was wrong? There is no way to hunt down all of my words once I let them loose into the world. Just imagine, or not imagine, but sorry, just think back to any number of tweets or posts, or even sometimes newspaper headlines or news stories that are incorrect in the first telling, and they have to print a retraction sometime later. Even if there is a retraction the next day, there is a very, very high probability that correction does not reach 100% of the people who saw the first article, the first post, the first tweet. And those people are going to go on believing whatever that first wrong information was. And there is simply no way to ever put that genie back in the bottle. All right, questions or comments before we take a step forward? All right, so let's talk about some exceptions, because right now I've been very, very categorical. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But there is a little bit that we sometimes need to remember where we are allowed to actually speak up. So we're going to start first with the words of Chafetz Chaim, who wrote literally the book on this that is considered to be one of the most respected guides. Not that it is 100% everybody agrees with all his points, but it is a great place to start. For the real concern of the Torah in forbidding evil talk, even when true, was the evil intent involved in wishing to disgrace our fellow and enjoy his discomfiture, right? So he wants to begin by saying, look, the Torah didn't just forbid this because it was false, but the Torah forbid it because obviously sometimes it's true, but the Torah forbid it because it knew our heart, that we would be sharing this in order to cause harm, or at least embarrassment, which is a form of harm, and to then enjoy the process, right? Which means, with that as a guideline, there are certain very specific circumstances and very specific intentions that will allow us to share information about others. Because remember, the society does need some sharing of information. We can't just say, I don't know about the Cohens, I don't know about anything about them when someone asks if they have a dog. We have to be able to sometimes share information. All right, so here are our criteria. If the information that is being shared is being said for purely constructive purposes and meets the following conditions, then it can be shared. 1, the information must be seen by the speaker, meaning firsthand evidence, or be known, not hoped, not suspected, not thought, but known to be true, right? You can't share a lie, although we will get to a couple exceptions about that later, but in general, it cannot be a lie. 2, the information cannot be exaggerated, right? If you are sharing information about someone that needs to be shared because it's going to be constructive and it is true, it needs to remain exactly true. You can't give a little bit of extra oomph to the story. Because remember, you're not sharing this because it's fun. You're not sharing this because of the great look on other people's faces or because of the likes or retweets you're going to get. You're sharing it only for a constructive purpose. And that means it has to be exactly as it is, not exaggerated. 3, the speaker should be sure that the news breaks Jewish law, meaning if you're sharing this about another person and you're being honest and you're being truthful and you're trying to be constructive and you're not exaggerating it, it still needs to be an actual problem, meaning you still should only be sharing something in this manner if there is a constructive purpose, meaning that there is a real problem. The fact that so-and-so likes vanilla ice cream more than chocolate, while perhaps being a startling revelation about some flaw in their character, I may imagine, is not actually a violation of anything, right? They're not hurting anyone. They are not breaking any of the commandments. There's nothing there that needs to be shared. 4, the speaker must have pure intentions. Sometimes things need to be said, and they will be honest and not exaggerated, and they are coming to fix something that is a legitimate problem, but maybe you're not the perfect person to deliver it because you have mixed feelings about this. Maybe you are too joyful at being able to share this information about someone that is not so great. And that means you might need to find someone else or some other method of sharing it than just talking. 5, the speaker should first go to the sinner before speaking about him. Now, this is only in cases where it is safe. Again, in cases of abuse or where there is a chance of violence, you can go to the authorities directly. You don't have to do this middle step. But in the case where you think there's a problem, like, maybe Frank keeps ducking out of work 10 minutes early, and you know that this is stealing from his employer, or maybe the employer is not paying Frank fairly, and that's stealing from the worker, you should talk to the person that's causing the problem. Again, and if at all possible, if there is danger of retaliation, and unfortunately sometimes whistleblowers do get punished, then you can use other means to share that information in the case where a law is being broken. But ideally, you should always go to the person who has done the wrong thing first and talk about it with them privately, right? Number 6 is also on the same theme. If the purpose, meaning fixing the problem, can be achieved in a way other than speaking, meaning other than talking to someone else about the problem, that should be tried first, right? Sometimes there are ways to not point out another person's mistake and still get the problem solved. Again, obviously, in cases of violence or danger, you don't need to take a middle road, go straight to the authorities and take care of it that way. But in more of the mundane, average problems that a person might have at work or with family or neighbors, sometimes there are other ways to solve the problem rather than outing them in a way that will cause them shame and embarrassment. And 7, the speaking should not cause more damage to the subject than would have been decreed in a court. So this is not such a big issue in our modern world, because in our modern world, we have courts that are generally fair and honest on average. But in the ancient world, where you might be sharing information with a court, especially a non-Jewish court, that could sentence somebody to the death penalty, for example, for theft, whereas in Judaism, theft never results in capital punishment, then yes, if you're living in the Middle Ages in Europe or in the Muslim world, you would probably want to not go to the authorities about certain problems because you don't want to get a person killed just because they stole a sheep. So that is something that did need to be considered. But again, in the modern world, it would be very rare that a person would suffer consequences in excess of what would have been handled in a proper, honest court. All right. Exceptions for lying. And I know this may sound weird, but there are times when we are allowed to lie. Sometimes where we're even supposed to lie, but they are few, they are far between, and you have to be careful you don't overextend your own belief of when this applies. So we can lie in cases to create peace, cases of privacy, to avoid embarrassment, and to avoid undue trouble to others. And we're going to look at details of each of those. So for peace, for example, one may lie in order to reconcile husband and wife, friends, siblings, and others who are fighting. Now, such lies should only be aimed at restoring peace and not giving advantage to anyone in the fight, right? You don't lie on behalf of the husband in a way that helps the wife win the argument, or helps the husband win the argument. You would lie in a way of saying, he really misses you, even if you haven't heard that he has said that, just as a way of getting a little bit of that emotional reconciliation going. Now, this should only be done if you are sure that reconciliation is A, in the interest of both husband and wife, right? And B, that both husband and wife are ready to reconcile if there was just a little bit of extra room for them to make that happen. This doesn't mean that you do the sitcom version of sending people notes that says that both sides wants to apologize and you set up a funny situation in the cafe. No, do not be stupid. Sitcoms do not tell us how to solve problems. They tell us how to get laughs. So, but sometimes a gentle, not 100% true statement can help move people into a position where they can realign that relationship and do the work of fixing whatever happened between them. Again, this should be used very, very carefully and be used only as a means of bringing peace, not as a way of letting one side win or dominate the other. Privacy. Your life is your life, and you are allowed to lie in ways that do not harm others or do not cause other problems in order to protect your own private life, right? Classic example, if you are pregnant, but you are not ready to share that information with the world or with the person talking to you, you are under no obligation to honestly tell the person who asks, "Are you pregnant?" "Yes, I'm pregnant." Right? You can keep that to yourself, right? You can say no. And even though you know you are, it is perfectly fine to keep that information away from the other person in order to maintain your privacy. You are allowed to control access to your private affairs. So for things like this, where your private life is not harming anyone and it does not need to be shared with anyone for their safety or benefit, you are absolutely allowed to tell them to buzz off. But if telling them to buzz off doesn't work, you are allowed to paper over their question with something that is not 100% true if it gets them to buzz off. Embarrassment. You can lie to avoid embarrassing another person, right? If asked where someone is, you can say that they are at some event rather than saying they are at home with an embarrassing problem. Right? If someone says, "Oh, so where's Frank?" and Frank is home with a really, really bad case of diarrhea, you don't have to say he's at home with diarrhea. You can say he's busy, or he's at work, or he's out, or something else. You don't have to be 100% honest if it's going to make Frank feel embarrassed that everybody knows about his stomach problems, right? Someone else's embarrassing part of their life is theirs to choose whether to share or not. And that also goes with regards to someone's past. Again, doesn't matter whether it's true, you are allowed to make a lie to cover up part of someone's embarrassing past. Again, not harmful, not dangerous, not violent, not anything like that, but just, they did something stupid when they were a kid that they would rather more people didn't know about. You are absolutely allowed to say, "No, I don't think so-and-so ever did something like that," because it's not your job to be the truth police in a way that is only causing embarrassment and not helping someone else. So again, we are protecting a person by saying something that is slightly not true in this case. Again, this does not mean, just like with the last one, that you are allowed to lie to protect someone who has actually engaged in wrongdoing. Right? If the cops show up and say, "Do you know where so-and-so was last night?" You don't say, "Oh, he or she was hanging out with me all night," if they weren't, while they were out actually committing a crime, right? You don't lie for that, but you can lie for things that are just a matter of embarrassment and which are no one else's business and definitely not your business to share. Also, to avoid embarrassment, sometimes you can lie positively. And the classic example taken from the Talmud is that of going to the wedding. There is an argument between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, the two great academies of their age, of when you go to the wedding, what do you say when the bride is ugly? Right? You show up and everybody goes and greets the bride and groom. Right? That's a big part of Jewish weddings. And everybody will always talk about how beautiful the bride looks. But what if she's not beautiful, right? Not just not beautiful. What if she's just like really, really ugly. Well, Beit Shammai says, one recites praise of the bride as she is, which would basically mean you have a great personality. You are my favorite person. You are so kind. I remember how you cooked those cookies last week and it was great. And just don't say anything about how she looks. Now, Beit Hillel has a different opinion. One recites a fair and attractive bride. Basically, you lie. You say, you are beautiful. Okay, but it's a lie. And Beit Shammai calls them on that. Beit Shammai said to Beit Hillel, in a case where she was lame or blind, which in those days were considered to be unattractive features, does one say to her, a fair and attractive bride? But the Torah says, keep you far from a false matter, right? From Exodus 23. So their standard of physical beauty was different than ours. And thankfully we have, I hope, a better understanding that people with different types of body shapes and styles can be beautiful. But for the moment, let's assume that this was somebody that by any standard would be considered physically unattractive. Beit Shammai's point is still legitimate. Do I have to say that they are pretty? Doesn't that mean I'm lying? Right? Can't I just talk about something else rather than their physical attractiveness? Well, Beit Hillel responds, with regard to one who bought something poorly made from the market, should you A, praise it and increase its value in his eyes, or B, insult it and reduce its value in his eyes? You must say that he should praise it in his eyes. From here, the sages said, a person's disposition should always be empathetic with humanity. So what Beit Hillel are trying to say is, look, this person is getting married. And at this moment, their marriage, their wedding, this is what is real, right? This is not an option, right? If someone wants to ask your opinion about the attractiveness of somebody without getting married to them, then by all means, give your honest appraisal. Right? If you think actress A is pretty, say she's pretty. If you think actress A is not so pretty, say she's not so pretty. And the same, of course, for any male actors. But if they're actually getting married, if this is a done deal, then by saying that the person is unattractive or by deliberately avoiding comment about the attractiveness when it will be obvious by its omission, you are causing strife in this relationship from day one. Because now, bride or groom, depending upon who was left out of the praise, is going to look at their beloved a little differently. They're going to look and say, well, that guy didn't say that she was pretty. That guy didn't say he was handsome. Did I marry somebody who's not handsome, who's not pretty? Should I be regretting my choice? I mean, yes, she's nice, or yes, he's a nice guy, but now that so-and-so didn't mention their attractiveness, maybe I need to rethink this relationship. Now, yes, is that shallow? Is that vain? Of course. But are there people who are shallow and vain when they are young and getting married? Almost all of us, right? We are not our full, mature, wise selves, or at least we hope that we become that person. Which means that if you are introducing a potential bit of resistance, of grit within the relationship that's going to cause friction, then you should really seriously consider what you're saying that avoid that. And you don't have to be, well, I'm going to stand on the principle of truth. And if he can't take it, if she can't take it, then that's their problem. It's like, no, give them a break. They're young, they're stupid, and the wrong thing said at the wrong time can really create something that they're going to have to work out in couples therapy. Better to just say, you look beautiful, and not worry about whether or not they could win a beauty contest. All right. So that finishes up that topic. We do have a few more or two more topics where sometimes we are allowed to say something that is not 100% true. One of them is to avoid undue trouble for someone else. Right? This is not about covering yourself. This is about helping someone else. Such as if somebody cooks a meal for you, you can say that the food was fine, it was great, in order to keep them from making more. right? Or in the classic example of the ancient world where food was much more scarce, you would say the food was fine to make sure they didn't try to give you more, and they couldn't really afford to give more, but they would do it anyway because they wanted to be such a good host. You are allowed to say the cooking was good, even when the cooking wasn't good. Likewise, you can say that you don't need a ride. Like if you tell someone you're going on a trip and they say, oh, do you need a lift to the airport? You can say no, even if you actually do need a lift, because you know that if you say you need a lift, this is the kind of person that's going to jump in and they are going to be there for you at 5 a.m. and drive you to the airport and then pick you up and bring you home. And that's going to cause them trouble. And it's going to make them late for work, or it's going to make them miss something else that they should be doing, or something else they would enjoy doing. You're allowed to say, no, I got it covered, even if you haven't got it covered just yet. So it is okay to be just that little bit not truthful in a way that protects other people from what the honesty might cause. Again, we're not talking about situations of theft and damage and violence and fraud and all of that. We're just talking about some of the little back and forth in a normal life that sometimes a little extra empathy for the other person and a careful choice of word can improve everybody's situation. And finally, as a summary for everything we've been going through, we'll turn to Ramban, that is Nachmanides, not to be confused with Rambam, who is Maimonides. I know their names sound very, very similar, but they are two very different people. But he gives this beautiful summary. It is possible that one could be a scoundrel, a terrible, terrible person, with the full permission of the Torah, meaning they could do it within the guidelines of Torah, as long as he didn't violate specific commandments. He could be drunken, he could be gluttonous, he could be crass, and he could speak all sorts of vile things. So after giving the details of those things that are prohibited, the Torah now gives us a general command to be holy. As we see from Leviticus 19, speak to all the congregation of the children of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Right? So there is a temptation to look at everything that we've talked about tonight and to go into more of the details and study, to find the loopholes, to find the exact limit of what can or can't be said in different circumstances, and to exploit it for your own benefit or in a way that does cause harm to others, but didn't technically actually break the commandment, right? The commandments are the minimum, not the maximum expectation of our behavior. And a person can still be not a great person, even while meeting that minimum. And that's why God told us in the Torah, don't just settle for the minimum. As much as you can, aim for the maximum. Be a better person. Reach for that holiness, right? That is where we should be going, especially when it comes to how we speak. Because how we speak is one of the most common activities, and it is probably the most common activity that has the potential to cause someone else harm. Right? More than what we do with our fists and teeth, more than what we do with even behind the wheel of a car, we are more likely to cause harm, and harm that will have a lasting impact by what we say or don't say in the wrong situations. So it is with good cause that the Torah gives us many commands, and it is with good cause that our sages have given us much guidance on this topic. Please continue to study and be careful how you speak. What you say really does matter. Any last questions or comments that people would like to share?
Yeah, real quick, I was going to just ask, Hilchot Tumat, Hilchot Duot, Chafetz Chaim, is that from particular sections of books, or?
Exactly. So, for example, when we have Chafetz Chaim down here on this page, that is his book, and it's chapter 10 and section 2. Whereas if we look at something like, just a second, like Erichin, that's Talmud. If we go back to Hilchot Deot, that's Rambam Mishnah Torah. Right? If we look at Hilchot Tumat Sara'at, that is also from Mishnah Torah. Proverbs is Proverbs. Rashi is commentary on the Torah. And the great thing is almost all of these can be found, even in English, on the website I've mentioned a number of times called Sefaria, SEFARIA.org.
Oh, it's on Sefaria too? I have that app. That's funny.
Exactly. So if you go to Sefaria and you search for Hilchot Deot, you should be able to find that section. Or if you search for Chofetz Chaim, I don't remember if they have the entire translation of Chofetz Chaim. I think they do, but I can't swear to that. And since I'm being careful with my language, I won't. But I'm pretty sure that they have, if not all of it, at least many large sections of it.
All right, I'll definitely run through it. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. And